What's up, guys? Welcome back to the MontyVerse. We are joined today by the co-writer of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers: The Return, Matt Hotson. Matt, how are you doing?
How are you?
I'm doing great. First off, I want to say congratulations. This
Thank
this
you.
book is really fantastic. I finished reading issue 4. You guys stuck the landing. It really is, I think, one of the best comic books of the year.
That's awesome. I appreciate it. We were a little nervous about issue 4 because, as you said before we started, is we took some big swings and we're trying some stuff out. And I don't think a lot of people are maybe going to see some of the stuff that we had coming. But to see just the initial response from you and a handful of other people that have read advanced copies, we're excited that people are into it.
That's what I think you guys have excelled at the most with this story. I mean, we went into this as fans not knowing what to expect. The return was kind of an unknown factor. It was this 30th anniversary book being written by Amy Jo Johnson. She's returning to add her voice to the character of Kimberly again, and then picking it up and seeing it for what it is. It really is a fantastic piece of art, and the fact that you guys play with the fan expectations, not only that, but thematically, like story wise, people who analyze the story and the themes, the book is constantly evolving from issue 1 to 4. And that's something that's really spectacular.
Thank you. That was the goal. One of the funniest things when the book finally came out back in February was, there's a lot of people that are just like, oh, Amy Jo Johnson, the original Pink Ranger, she's writing a comic book. She's writing a Power Rangers comic book. That's super cool. And then the book came out, and no one meant it as an insult, but it was like, oh, Amy Jo Johnson writing a comic book, and it's good. It's actually good, which was very fun to see. But we've been trying to defy expectations the whole way through. So it's great to hear that people are excited and sort of getting stuff that they like, but not what they were expecting at all. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. And I have to ask, as a comic book fan, how does it feel writing your first comic book?
It's incredible. The whole process has been amazing, and I've been treating it as if this might be it. If this is it, then I sort of put everything I had from my end into it, and it's almost like my life's work. Now, right before we started this, just to brush up, I did read all 4 issues back to back to back. Maybe a little depressing that I can consume my entire life's work in like 28 minutes. But I'm very proud of this. It's been a goal of mine my whole life to work in comic books. So I'm super grateful for the opportunity, and I love seeing the responses.
You should be very proud. This is, and listen, I think I speak for most people when I say, please don't let this be the end. Please keep doing this. You guys, this is really something special. And I'm going to keep saying that because I really think it is. But one thing I want to know is this story, when I first started reading it, it felt very personal to Amy Jo. It felt, in a way, kind of breaking the fourth wall. And it's almost autobiographical in a lot of ways. How did you find ways to insert your voice into that, into her very personal story?
Oh, what a great question. Um, yeah, well, some of it is you can see where Amy Jo, the person, is coming from through the character. And then, yeah, I mean, I was involved every step of the way. I never really tried to, it never occurred to me to put my own voice into it. It's almost just my voice is there in the storytelling. Um, Such a weird question. I
Yeah.
was not expecting this at all. It was fun diving into playing with, I mean, because there's parts of it that are definitely Amy Jo saying some stuff,
Yes.
and there's parts of it that are us being a little coy and playing with, um, Amy Jo's a person because she played a character that meant a lot of people at an important time in their lives, have a lot of expectations placed on her. So there's definitely times where it may seem like it's Amy Jo saying something, but it's us saying something with Kimberly that maybe isn't necessarily true, but plays into expectations that people have or are defying them. So if I was able to exert any voice at all, I'd say maybe it's through there. We're just sort of playing with people's expectations of what they think Kimberly would be like, and how some people really connect Amy Jo Johnson and Kimberly Hart together, and just sort of finding ways to play with that throughout the whole story.
Great answer. I think for me, I think you come through in the comic book influence in a lot of ways as well, because there's stuff in here that's very reminiscent of obviously the big, like, there's been a lot of post-apocalyptic, not really post-apocalyptic, but future comic book stories ever since Old Man Logan. You know, the two big ones are Old Man Logan and The Last Ronin that were huge. And they take these really big old franchises and they reinvent them and tell a more adult story. I think you guys did a fantastic job of skirting away from those stories where those are more about failures and how these heroes deal with failure and come back from that. Whereas in this one, the Power Rangers are really victorious, and it's kind of dealing with that trauma of success. But not only that, there's also influence of like the early IDW Turtle comics as well, I've seen here. So is there any comic that really influenced the way you wrote the story, or had a great impact in how you chose to tell the story as a comic book fan?
It's definitely the old Man Logan and Last Ronin were influences, even if I didn't realize it when we were setting out. But I think you nailed it on the head a few seconds ago. You said the trauma of success. The Power Rangers are victims of their own success. There are some fantastic superhero stories that take place in the future where terrible things have happened and nothing worked out. But what happens to superheroes when they succeed, when there's no more bad guys left to fight? What happens when you're a 15-year-old, superhero, and then you grow up and you're a 45-year-old person, and being a superhero when you're 15 has almost ruined your life, has affected you in a way that you'll never recover from. That's what we wanted to explore, and it's not something you really see in a lot of those other comic books that you mentioned.
It really isn't, and it's something that really drew me in because this is essentially, for the most part, a utopian society. I mean, the world is at peace. There's Zach's experimenting with clean morphing grid energy. Billy's doing some fantastic things. So it's really cool to see how the Rangers have evolved, and also how they keep getting pulled back to their past, to that trauma of growing up as, for better or worse, child soldiers essentially in this war that they never started. So I really love how you guys were able to explore that.
Thank you. It's we had to, well, because this is a new universe, we were able to sort of get rid of a lot of the other stuff that happens, which was never us, denying those things. Those exist in the original Power Rangers universe. One of the best things about Power Rangers is that it was able to go on for 30 seasons, which is insane. But for us, we had to sort of jettison a lot of that stuff to say, well, what happens when a superhero does win the day? We don't get to see that happen. And like you said, for some of the characters, it's great and you can move on and everything's fine. But for other characters, you wouldn't be able to move on.
Yeah, and one thing that you guys did that really blew me away as a fan of the show is I think that you captured the voices of the characters and the actors in a way that not many people have, to an exact degree. Like, I can hear, reading that first issue, I hear David coming out of Billy. Like, it sounds very similar in the way he talks. And I don't know if that was just Amy putting her lived experiences in there or not, but I think guys did an amazing job of capturing those voices of the original five Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Did you guys do any research on the show before you started, or did you kind of just wing it and kind of picked up where your story started?
Well, it's interesting you said that about the characters. I mean, Amy Jo and David Yost are very, very close, and I know David now too. So it was easy to sort of nail his voice. And if I did have any, I wasn't a huge Power Rangers fan when I was a kid, but if I liked anybody the best, it was definitely Billy, because Billy's the Donatello. Donatello's my favorite turtle. But we really did walk a fine line because it was important to Amy Jo, because she knows that there are people who sort of connected to Kimberly so intrinsically, that she didn't want to do anything with any of the characters that would people could misconstrue as being negative about any of the real actors. Like for Zach, for example, Zach became a bit of a showboater and sort of tried to lean into the fame of being a Power Ranger. And there were versions and drafts where we went a little bit farther, but we definitely wanted to pull back. Just because even though we know it's fiction, we don't want anyone to think that Amy Jo is saying anything bad about any of those other characters. As far as research goes, yeah, I read almost all, probably 90% of all of the Boom books, which is great because they send them to Amy Jo for free, which is fun.
That's awesome.
And then for the show, I mean, I just watched one of your episodes where you and your girlfriend Nikki, right,
Yeah.
are watching Power Rangers, and that's kind of what Amy Jo and I did. Is she's one of those actors. I know a lot of actors that like refuse to watch anything that they do. So she had never seen Power Rangers. Plus, she was a 22-year-old working on a kids show, so it just never occurred to her to want to watch her stuff. And so I went through a bunch of synopses and I said, oh, this sort of really could relate to what we're doing, and we don't want to redo any beats. So we watched, I don't know, maybe a dozen episodes or something like that, and watching them with her for the first time 30 years later and getting sort of like behind the scenes commentary from her as we watched was pretty fun. But I think it helped really inform the book and the characters too.
It definitely did. And just from my perspective, as someone who's going back and rewatching the entire series, Amy is fantastic. She it's insane how talented she was at such a young age.
Why are you talking so weird? Hey, do you think you were like one of those intellectual people?
Then, but I'm glad that you guys are able to have a positive experience going back and watching it because it really is a fun show if you just let yourself have fun with it.
It's one of those things that you watch as an adult and it's just like, this is absolutely ridiculous, but it shouldn't in any way hamper your enjoyment of it. Like when you're a kid, it's the coolest thing ever. When you're a grown up, it's super, super silly, but that doesn't affect the level of enjoyment you can get out of something like that.
Absolutely. And you guys did a great job of balancing that tone. There's definitely some camp in here, and it's camp not done in a way that's cringy, like, oh, we're doing camp for the sake of camp. It's camp that actually informs the story and is used to kind of show the differences between past and present. And I really love that because there are some panels in here that feel like, and we'll talk about this because as directors, I want to know if you guys had, you both obviously have experience directing, and this book feels very cinematic in the way that some shots were set up, in the way that some of the panels were lit. It feels more movie or big budget blockbuster than it does comic book at times. Did any of that experience go into that? Like, how involved were you in planning the panels and the artwork? I know Nico is fantastic. His work is crazy in this, but I'm curious to see if any of your experiences informed how the book was structured.
I think it definitely did, and I think it's cinematic in a way that I sometimes you can read books and you're like, well, this comic book is trying too hard to be a movie, and it's not. So I think we embraced the medium of being a comic book, but did try to be cinematic. Our goal was to sort of write the $200 million Power Rangers movie that could never be. And so I do think both of our film and TV backgrounds really, really helped in that. It'd be interesting to hear what Nico would think. I think probably the first issue, there was a draft, there was a couple drafts where Nico never even got we never even got them yet, where we were probably being way too didactic with our panel choices and our shots and our page layouts. And it's because when you do screenwriting, and Amy Jo's written way more screenplays than I ever have, but you can't write shots. That's a huge no-no in TV and film writing. The writer writes the story, but does not write shots. That's for the filmmakers, the directors to do. So when you get to a comic book and you can say, oh, and then this is the shot. Oh, and this is the next shot. And you can actually describe what the shots are. It's easy to get carried away. So I think we did that at first. And then when Nico came on board and then I devoured any of his work that I hadn't already because I was familiar with him already, I think we peeled back a lot. And if we were to do even more issues and to keep writing, because a lot of this was written before Nico even came on board, I think we would let go even more. But I do think in the end, it does feel like a movie, but it's still a comic book and leans into comic bookiness stuff. So I think we found a good balance. As far as tone goes, thank you for what you said about tone, because tone with Power Rangers is so tricky. And now that it's out and it wasn't out when this book started coming out, is like X-Men 97, which everyone's freaking out over, which I love.
So good.
Is right? Like what a great example of something that looks at what a bunch of kids loved 30 years ago and brings it into the present day and tailors it to adults, but makes you still think you're watching the same show that's for kids and it's not anymore.
Yeah.
Before X-Men 97 existed, we were writing this and we were trying to do something like that. Is make you think it's the same thing you know and love as a kid, but peel away the parts that we just know wouldn't appeal anymore, wouldn't play, or would be corny and cheesy. And it was hard. I mean, there's that, not to be rude to any other someone's art, but there's a Power Rangers. Do you know the short film that came out a few years ago? Everyone knows that short
Yeah,
film,
I
which is
have an
really
interesting take on that.
right. It's very dark and serious, and that's cool, but that's definitely not something we wanted to do. We wanted to honor the original tone, still make it feel like it's for the original fans who are now grown-ups.
Yeah, I and you guys did a fantastic job of that because you mentioned Power Slash Rangers, which is the name of that short film. I think they went a little overboard. They tried to do gritty in the use in trying to make it a parody, but I think they got lost in the parody. Whereas I think you guys took what worked with Power Rangers and you didn't talk down to your audience, which is important. You kept the tone of Power Rangers, but you never treated us like we were still kids, and you never sold it to us like this was, oh, Power Rangers is goofy. We're just telling them. You took the concept of Power Rangers serious, and that's what fans have really been begging for. They've been begging for people to come in and to just take the idea, the concept of these heroes, these Power Rangers, and to tell a really good thematic story with it. And I think that's why you guys succeeded so much, because you just told a good story.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's just, man, it's just incredible. I will post this on Wednesday because I want to talk spoilers with you because
Yeah,
issue 4 is absolutely crazy, and the subversions of expectations in this issue were phenomenal because, like I said, the story was constantly evolving. I thought we were going with a very introspective story at first in issue 1 and issue 2, and then kind of the ending of issue 2 and issue 3 made it seem like it was a story about mothers and daughters and about legacy. And then issue 4 kind of brings it all back home. And it's like, no, this is a story about the Power Rangers. It's a story about legacy, it's a story about the Power Rangers, and it is a story about family and loss in a lot of ways and how we process that for certain people. With Selena very negatively, for Kimberly and Olivia very positively, or a lot more constructively. Was that the intention to have the story evolve like that over 4 issues?
it was definitely going to be about two daughters and how they deal with the loss of their parents. And we don't get to see too much of Olivia because we wanted to keep her a secret. But I think what you just said about people dealing with loss in ways that are destructive, not just to other people, but to themselves, or finding constructive ways to do it, it's good. But that said, you can see Kimberly, like Kimberly losing Tommy was everything to her. It ruined her life, even though she has a daughter and she's successful and she's off doing her own thing. You can see that it affected her in a way that she never recovered from. And we always wanted to tell a story about the original Power Rangers and what would happen if they didn't break up, which is the kernel that we started with like years ago when we started writing this. And there's definitely a delineation of there's the original Power Rangers and there's Tommy. And Tommy is one of those legacy characters that just keeps coming back and people love him. It's so much Tommy. We wanted to focus on the originals, but you can't tell a story about the originals, especially from Kimberly's point of view, without Tommy. And I think just sort of keeping Tommy included, even though he wasn't there at the very, very beginning, and wondering about where they would be is sort of where we came up with the story of losing Tommy. And then us as writers ultimately realizing you can't tell the story without Tommy, which is why he comes back. And the title, The Return, which we didn't come up with, someone at Boom came up with, which is a funny story. Um, we loved the title when we heard it. I think the first time, I think for the longest time, Amy Jo and I were going to call it Family Reunion, which ended up being just the title of issue 4. But The Return is great when we heard it because it's so deviously simple in that you think it's about the return of Kimberly Hart to Angel Grove or the return of maybe Rita's coming back for a long time. That's what you think it is. But ultimately, it's about Tommy Oliver returning and that just sort of being the linchpin that sort of connects this team and brings this family back together.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those deceptively simple titles. It's like Spider-Man Homecoming, right? You hear it and it's like, oh, it's Spider-Man Homecoming because he's coming home to Marvel. It's The Return because this is Amy Jo Johnson's return. And then you read issue 4 and you're like, oh, everything just comes full circle so perfectly in this issue. I mean, so many plot threads that were even I thought just not even relevant, like the fact that Selena has the saber-toothed tiger power coin and morpher in issue 1 at the end of issue 1, and then that comes back around in this issue, which is crazy. By the way, do we have a name for that ranger yet?
We've been calling her Repulsa Ranger.
I like that. I was going to say
Yeah.
Selena Tooth Tiger, but Repulsor Ranger is a lot better.
Consider it officially changed. That is so good. The thing with that is at the end of issue 1. So I mean, again, we'd been working on these scripts for years, and then Once and Always, the reunion special came out last year, and we had a bit of a secret heads up of what was sort of coming in that story before the episode premiered, before the reunion premiered, and we had known about. I think it's Ming is the Trini's
Yes.
daughter character,
Man.
and yeah, and a minute, and so she's getting trained to be the new Yellow Ranger. And when that started happening, we were just like, oh no, and like people are going to think this is the same thing with that last page on issue 1, and people are going to be like, oh, this is just going to be a retread of that. I realized that's kind of great. That if you get to the end of issue 1 and just like, oh, it's just about training one of Trini's relatives to be the new Yellow Ranger, then we throw that all out the window in issue 2. So that by the end, when you get to issue 4, and Selena does become the Yellow Ranger, you've completely forgotten about it, but it's not the Yellow Ranger you were expecting at all.
Yeah, it's crazy because reading issue 1, I think it was so brilliant for you guys to throw Olivia out there in the marketing to say like, oh, here's Olivia Hart, the new Green Ranger. So everyone's mind was so focused on that. Like, oh, Olivia's going to become the new Green Ranger. So that when issue 1 was such a roller coaster of emotions because I wasn't expecting, to see a relative of Trini show up with a morpher, and me and Nikki were talking about it. And I'm like, oh, that's so great. I didn't see that coming. And then issue 2 comes out, and I'm like, never mind. That's not what's happening. It's just we both read the issues at the same time, me and Nikki, and we both read them, and then we in separate rooms, and we converge in one room, and we're just like firing off, like, oh my god, I can't believe this happened. Oh my god, I can't believe it. And it just goes to show like how well you guys not only subverted the expectations of new fans like Nikki and old fans like me, but just told a really good story, because I immediately wanted to run and talk about it and talk about all the layering and themes. It's just really great.
Well, I'm glad you like. So Amy Jo and I, with the Kickstarter and stuff, which was incredibly successful, and we're so grateful to everyone that supported it. We had to give a lot away. We felt just as creators, as the writers, like Olivia Hart was a big one, and it was a big marketing tool, and we get it because you got to get people to sign up and order and support the campaign. We had to give a lot of stuff away, and so we really wanted to protect stuff. So it's nice to hear that you thought the Olivia thing, giving her away, was good, because a lot of people were like, well, "Where's Olivia Hart? Where's Olivia Hart? Where's Olivia Hart?" So we had to give her away really early, which spoiled something. But that said, it's not an Olivia Hart story at all, which is why we were sort of okay with that. Is sort of very great, get people excited about this thing. It's definitely not going to be about this character at all, and hopefully we'll learn more about her eventually. But we really protected. I think we did a good job of protecting the Tommy's return. I don't think anyone really saw that coming, and then even with Selena turning into the Yellow Power Ranger, which is why if this is posting on Wednesday, for the love of God, I hope it's revealed by the time this video goes live. Is that's why Amy Jo has that Kevin Eastman exclusive cover, which is so cool. But it has Selena's Yellow Ranger on it, which is why she can't reveal it, even though she wants to sell it and get people excited.
I was
But
curious about that.
well, we cheated a little bit too. We were a little bit sneaky because, when it comes to covers, covers are another marketing tool, and the covers get worked on way in advance of the issues. And, lots of people in the beginning were drawing like, the Rogue Red Ranger, and that was super cool. People were drawing Olivia, even though Olivia wasn't coming up for a little while, and that was cool. And then we were just like, please, well, obviously no one could draw Tommy because that would spoil everything, but like no Yellow Ranger, no one can draw the Repulsa Ranger. We don't want to spoil that. Let's save something. We got to save something. No one draws the Repulsa Ranger. And they finally agreed to it. And then when Amy Jo and I were just like, let's do our own exclusive cover with Kevin Eastman. Like, cool, what's it going to be? Like, he's going to draw the Yellow Ranger. Like, we broke our own rule, but it's pretty cool to have only one cover with that character on it, and it's drawn by Kevin Eastman.
I have to ask, as a Turtles fan, because from our online interactions, I know that you're a big Turtles guy. How is it to have Kevin Eastman draw the cover of your comic book, one of the covers to your comic book?
Pretty incredible. I mean, it's this whole project was just a ruse, just so I could have my name in the credits cover on a cover with a Kevin Eastman thing. You can definitely see my indulgence of the Ninja Turtles throughout this whole thing, where we threw in a Chet's reference in issue 1 there at Chet's Diner, which if you read the old '80s Mirage books, is that name Chet comes up a lot. And Jim Lawson, Turtles legend, drew the Boom exclusive cover to issue 1. And then the Kevin Eastman thing, like it just squeaked by. Like, Amy Jo met him a couple years ago and asked him, and he said yes. And then just the timing of the release, it was never ever going to work out. And so we just had to get used to the fact that it was a no, and it was a no for the longest time. And it really just came together like weeks ago, literally weeks ago. And this 4th issue that comes out on May 29th is a little bit late. It was supposed to come out a few weeks ago. And that's kind of what made Kevin Eastman be able to do a cover. So it was such a blessing in disguise, in that he had this tiny little window, and he said he was going to hand it in the last second, and he did. And it was perfect. And if the book hadn't been a couple weeks late, I don't think it ever would have happened. And it was still a no for a long time, even with his schedule opening up. So it was really just Amy Jo saying, I'm gonna commission Kevin myself, and it will be my own exclusive cover. Let's pretend I'm a comic book store, and this is my store exclusive, and pay for it ourselves, or Amy Jo paying for it herself and being able to sell herself. That's the only way that it worked. It was never going to work. So Amy Jo really stepped up, and it's one of the best gifts anybody's ever given me, even though it's not for me, is that this is amazing Kevin Eastman cover, and my name is up in the credits corner too.
I'm trying to hide my dumb smile, because as a comic book fan, I'm so happy for you. That's so cool. I mean, not only Eastman, but you have some of the best artists doing covers for this. I mean, you have who I consider one of the best in the business right now, Dan Mora. Do all the character designs. He did covers for this. Like you mentioned, Jim Lawson. You have Goni Montez doing these fantastic watercolor-esque covers that are some of my favorite. And it's one of the backgrounds here right now. It's just, you guys were blessed with some really amazing artwork. And Nico deserves credit too. I feel like I haven't mentioned him enough. but the stuff that he did in here is fantastic.
The covers are not, I mean, talking about Turtles, like the Escorza brothers, which is, they're doing store exclusives
Yes.
for somebody. The Escorza, like, I never asked for the Escorza brothers, nor did I ask for the Escorza brothers to do what they're doing, which is they're taking their last Ronin covers and just making them Power Ranger covers.
Yeah.
So you can hold up the Power Rangers books beside the last Ronin books, and it's just the same cover with Power Rangers. Like, what? Or even like David Mack. David Mack is doing the Kickstarter exclusive cover. David Mack's doing the Kickstarter exclusive cover because he did a cover for Power Rangers 100, and he chose to do the Pink Ranger. And I walked up to him at a Comic Con, and I was like, "I'm working on a comic book with Amy Jo Johnson. Do you want to do a cover?" And he was like, "Yeah, that sounds cool." And I was like, "That's how it works? It's this easy? You can walk up to a legend and say," and I said to him, like, "Hey, I saw you like did Pink Ranger. Did you choose Pink Ranger? Did they tell you?" And he's like, I chose the Pink Ranger. She's the best. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be the best day of my life. And it is. Like, what an incredible cover. Every cover we have is nuts. And we're super, super spoiled. And then we should absolutely talk about Nico. Let's talk about Nico in regards to issue 4. He deserves so much credit because when we first talked to Nico on this crazy Zoom, which was Toronto and LA and Tokyo, Japan, all at the same time, way back in September, he was so complimentary and he was great and it was so fun to connect with him. And he's such a true Power Rangers fan and Sentai fan. He only had one note, and it wasn't a Nico Leon artist note. It was him as a fan. He said, "I am a fan. If there's anything I would say after reading the 4 drafts of the scripts that are out there right now, is in issue 4. I just want to see the original team fight a little bit more." And issue 4 is got so much of Nico's fingerprints on it because we ended that Zoom, and I was like, well, I don't know how we could really change issue 4 to get more of the original team fighting in there. It would kind of break everything. And Amy Jo, to her full credit, was like, "We have to. We have to listen to Nico. He is the only fan who knows about these scripts before the book comes out. And he is a fan and he wants this thing, and we should absolutely listen to him." So we completely broke issue 4. There's an amazing draft of issue 4 I'm a big fan of that no one will ever see. I'm definitely saving some of those ideas for a hopeful future, which was very, very different. It starts in all in the same place, but like Tommy, who comes back on, I want to say page 9 or 10 in issue 4,
Yeah,
he
I
used to come
think
back
so.
on page like 19 or 20,
Wow.
right? So all this other stuff happened, and he came back, and Tommy coming back was the end. But because Nico wanted it, we brought Tommy back like 10 pages earlier and have all the original team morph and fight together as a team. And it's 100% because of Nico. And it really creates a fantastic flow and cause and effect of getting Tommy back in the suit. Tommy never suited up in our original drafts. Tommy just came back. Now Tommy's the Green Ranger, and
Wow.
him being there is what solves things with Selena, and they don't defeat Selena through violence. He stops her by appealing to her humanity and her innocent nature and talking to her about her mother, and that's what solves and saves the day. And that's because Nico just gave us one little note, a little fan request that changed everything.
It's insane that like completely changed the whole issue. But I think in a lot of ways for this story, I think it works really well because and I just love how you mentioned in anime there's something called talk no jutsu, which if you're a fan of Naruto, it's the fact that Naruto defeats a lot of his enemies just by talking to them, just by appealing to their humanity. And I kind of really loved how that's how this story ended with kind of Tommy appealing to the humanity of Selena. And it's like this the Power Rangers of old coming back and showing why they were so special in the first place. So that worked well thematically, and just also it does a fantastic job of subverting expectations, right? Because I went into this issue expecting it to be like Selena versus Olivia and your typical like third act action movie fight scene. And then you have Olivia morph and she doesn't know what she's doing. And I love that. And that's something to me that was like, oh, okay, this is great because you're injecting that realism again into the story. She's a kid who doesn't know what she's
Yeah.
doing, and she picks up one of the most powerful weapons in the universe, but she still doesn't know what she's doing. And I
I
really love
love
that.
I love the issue 3 page turn at the very end where, like, "I love you to meet Olivia Hart, my daughter," and she's just there looking like a super heroic green Power Ranger. And I think it was Amy Jo's idea, is like the first time you see her at the beginning of issue 4, she's like, "I think I'm gonna puke." Because she's never teleported before. She just
Yeah.
teleported to the moon. She doesn't know what she's doing. So she doesn't want to be, we didn't want a Green Ranger like Deus Ex Machina with Olivia who could just show up and save the day because it's just not realistic at all.
Yeah, and Again, I was a little worried about that. I was like, is Livy going to come and it's just going to be kind of like a punch 'em up? But no, I should have had more faith in you guys because you delivered something way more layered, way more complex, something that served the overall story. Because I think bringing Tommy back, it not only works for this story, but I think it's also very important for the Power Ranger community. Obviously, we lost JDF very tragically, but to kind of show the importance he has on the group, and I think this issue really does do that. It stresses that Tommy is a very important character. This is the legacy of that character is very important to the overall idea of the Power Rangers. Like now that he's back, the Power Rangers are back, and the Power Rangers are back to being the Power Rangers, and you have the adult Rangers kind of going like, "Hey, we lost our way, but now that you're back and you could teach us the old ways again and teach us how to be these positive influenced people again." Like I really love that as a fan of the show.
Yeah, I don't like to talk about JDF too much because I never met him and I know how close he and Amy Jo were. He used to send her just like the sweetest and funniest like video messages and audio messages. And this was all written before JDF passed. And it's sort of this oxymoron thing of like with Twee who played Trini, like her and Amy Jo were friends for such a long time, and Twee's been gone for a long time, and I know some people's comments of like, well, why can't we have Trini in the book? Like Trini is still around as a character. For Amy Jo writing a story about the adult version of all these people, she didn't want to write an adult version of Trini because that's Twee to her, and
Yeah.
she's not here, which I understand completely, and I think is an important element of the story is dealing with loss like that. And then when what happened, JDF happened, I think she and I talked about it for 90 seconds and said, let's not change anything. And as time has gone on and people have healed from that, like you said, I think it's such a nice, sweet thing. It wasn't intended to be meta at all, and it's not. But like Tommy, who was brought to life by JDF with such sincerity and goodwill, having him back at the end is so therapeutic for the characters, but it's hard not to see how some people, some fans will just find a lot of bittersweetness in that from what they've experienced with JDF in the real world.
Yeah, and I don't want to add too much emphasis on it. I just want to let you know from a fan's perspective, I think that was really, I think it works really well. And I hope that fans really gravitate towards that because it's a nice love letter to the character and to the legacy of that character and what he means to Power Rangers. But that was really, really well done. Uh,
Thanks.
I have to ask. Issue ends. Huge, huge tease. Are we getting the returning again, continuing to return?
Well, I made a tweet which I think Amy Jo asked me to remove. Was we'll only do the return if the return can be spelled RE2URN. Nothing official to announce at this time. If you read the very last page, you can definitely tell that Amy Jo and I have an idea of what we would want to do next. So again, issue 4 isn't out yet, but the Kickstarter support was insane, and hopefully we will get to do more. But there's literally nothing. I'm not being coy. There's nothing to announce at this time. I'm so excited about that last page because we definitely wanted to tell an open and closed story, and I think we did. And that last page, I mean, it's a terrible thing to say. You could rip that last page out of the book and it would be an open and closed story. But just in case people are interested in more of the return, we're definitely giving you an idea of where we would be headed.
I mean, listen, like you said, the Kickstarter was insane. I'm a support. Me and Nikki both supported it. I love that they give digital copies too, by the way. I just, as an aside, that's really cool of Boom to give everyone who paid for it digital copies as well as physical copies. That's really nice.
I think it's insane. Like as the writer, just to see, because I support Kickstarters too, and yeah, sometimes it takes forever to get them, and then to know that it's coming out in stores. You never want people who supported the Kickstarter to ever feel ripped off in any way. And so the fact that they came out digital on the same day, so we're all experiencing together. As one of the creators on the book, I'm so grateful. And I think there was another thing too, with shipping costs, and there was a concern there, which I don't want to delve too deep in because it's so far outside of my wheelhouse, but I think Boom addressed that too, which I can't remember any time that anyone's ever been said anything to a company like, yeah, let's make things cheaper. So the whole experience there has been great because as a supporter of Kickstarters and as someone who was in Canada where shipping to everything is super expensive, seeing how Boom has worked with the supporters to support them back and keep them involved in this whole what feels like an experience, not just a comic book coming out. It feels like an experience. It's been great. So I'm really grateful to them.
It definitely feels like an experience. Before we talk about the overall experience, I have to ask, that's a very interesting last shot. Reading the book, like you said, it felt like a closed off story. It felt like a perfect circle to me. And it's better than endings are hard. Endings are hard for any medium, comics, television, movies, but this story feels so complete. And then that last page came, and I'm like, whoa, they're doing it. I'm like, that's interesting. Really interesting way to kind of put that final thumbprint on the story, because all I want to do is just theorize and talk about it now. Like, I'm like, where'd this person come from? It's a female. It's coming out Wednesday, so we can talk about it. It's a female White Ranger. Really interesting. There's some stuff that I picked up on. I don't know if it's you guys hinting at. Do you guys know who that person is? I'm not. You don't have to answer who it is, but do you guys know who that person is?
What an interesting question. It's one of the scariest and most fun things about this because, as I've said, we were working on this for 4 years before it even came out. And so we've known about this last page. Issue four is really it's fun. It's a fun issue to me because it's the one I'm sort of least familiar with, which sounds weird, but we were getting them ready and we had so much time and we refined issue one over and over and over and over again. And then issue two and issue three. And then, like I said, issue four kind of broke open last fall because of that note from Nico. So it's the most fresh and new one to me, whereas the other three scripts, we definitely made some tweaks to over the years, but they were kind of set in stone. And then issue four changed so much, and you get to that last page, and just like, oh yeah, like that's an idea we came up with years ago. And the ping pong with Amy Jo and I was really fun because I was like, well, what about this? And then someone suggested this person under that White Ranger helmet. And then we said, well, what if it was sort of this type of person? And then Amy Jo had an idea, was like, it has to be that idea. And then for the longest time, it was that idea. And then she didn't want to do that idea anymore. And then I had a big fight with her about that idea. And I remember being in a canoe with her and threatening to tip the canoe unless she agreed because it was her own idea. And then we went away from that idea completely. So we have this person who is in the back of the book wearing a White Ranger suit, and it's still an organic, ongoing process. And even David Yost, she asked David Yost when they did their live reading, like literally last week, because David Yost hasn't seen issue four yet, and he had a suggestion of something to do or not do. So it's fun because that person's in the back of the book, and the book's coming out in 3 days. Do we know who it is exactly? We know who it is for sure, and we know where that person came from and who they are and what they're doing. But it's still open to change, which is terrifying and it's still exciting.
Very exciting.
Because again, there is no official sequel. But if we're thinking in our heads what we would do, this person's in the back of the book, and it's a really important person. I don't know. I'm rambling. Do I know who it is? Yes. Does Amy Jo know who it is? Yes. But it's probably still going to change exactly who's under the helmet.
See, I didn't find you rambling at all. I found it interesting because you're actually going through the thought process of it, and
Yeah.
that to me is fascinating. I love seeing other people's creative processes. So to kind of get an insight into yours, I'm like, that's really cool. I'm excited. My juices are flowing. I'm like,
Cool.
because what's really interesting about the fact that you guys kind of are started your own timeline, as you will, in Power Rangers, and kind of went from Mighty Morphin and only Mighty Morphin, is it could, like, as a fan, I'm like, it could be anyone. It could be so many different characters because we're 30 years past the point of Mighty Morphin. So in 30 seasons of Power Rangers, you could really put anyone in that suit. And it's really interesting. And I can't wait to see fans kind of start speculating, because that's what's cool to me about comic books and the comic book fandom. It's a lot, the fun is speculation and theorizing. And you guys left the perfect cliffhanger at the end of this book. So if we don't get a return to, you're gonna have to DM me who that person is. You're gonna have to let me know on the low who that person would be.
I will. I promise.
Okay, I have more of like a thought provoking question for you right now.
Do it.
I think I'm not the only one when I say that the work you guys have done on the return is the kind of storytelling we've been seeking as the Power Ranger fans for a very long time. And we have all these rumors going around now that the main series has kind of ended the main continuity, that they're rebooting. Would you guys ever be interested in consulting or writing on the Power Rangers reboot? Like if Hasbro came up to you and said, "Hey, do you guys want to consult, or do you guys want to write any of this to kind of put your imprint on the main Power Rangers franchise?" Would that be something that you guys were interested in?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm in the dark just like everybody else. I think they're announcing stuff at San Diego Comic-Con, maybe, but I don't know what they're up to. But I'm super, super curious. As for continuing to be involved, yeah, You saw how excited I'm getting talking about White Ranger on the very last panel. It's because it's still an ongoing thing, whereas so much of this stuff has just been done for a long time. So to me, it's just like, oh, the finish line's finally here. It's finally coming out. But in terms of getting to create new stuff, it's been a long time. So absolutely, I can't speak for Amy Jo, but she's had a blast with this too. It's super exciting. So to continue to be involved, yeah, why wouldn't we be? Plus, um, Boom is just fantastic to work with. Like, just the nicest people and so supportive. So yeah, we should definitely keep things going if we could.
Yeah, I'm glad that you guys have meant that in Boom, because I didn't even think that. Like, I just want you guys with Boom forever. Boom, if you're watching this, because obviously you are. If you're watching this, you know you guys have to keep Amy and Matt on the payroll, because we need more of these stories. I need them. They're so damn good. But I'm more curious, like, if the Power Rangers like television show, like if they're rebooting it, like the plan is they're going to put it on Netflix and they're going to reboot it. If they came to you and they said, we wanted you guys involved in advisory roles, writing roles, we want you in the writer's room for that series, would you guys be interested in doing the TV side of it? Because I mean, you both have a lot of experience in television and in directing. Would you guys be interested in writing or directing episodes of that?
Yes, we would. I think that'd be incredible. Yeah, I work in TV a lot, so it'd be a natural transition for me. Amy Jo is a fantastic director. She's directed Superman. I met her. That's how I met Amy Jo. Is I was her assistant director on one of her movies a few years ago. So it would be such a natural transition for her. But then the other thing she's been saying recently, which is just her saying, like, just thinking out loud, is like, why isn't this a cartoon yet? Because I think so. A few people have said that online. Why isn't this a cartoon movie? Like, wow, why isn't this a cartoon movie? And I told her about X-Men '97 as an example. She's like, yeah, why aren't we doing this as a cartoon? Let's go. Like, yeah, well, let's go. Who do we call?
Who do we call? Guys, Hasbro, I know you're watching. CEO of Hasbro, I know you're tuned in right now. Can we get this going? Because that's one, I've been saying that since issue 1. Since I saw that double spread panel, that huge spread page by Nico of the Rogue Red Ranger kind of doing all of these heroics, I'm like, this needs to be animated. It's literally begging to be animated. How can we get this done? Who can we contact?
Yeah, and it's cool. Like Amy Jo hasn't acted in a long time. She switched to directing and writing a long time ago. But it's the only time since I've known her that she's been like, I would do that. I would act as Kimberly Hart in the Return animated series. So I mean, we should hop on that. That sounds pretty fun.
I think the entire fandom would want that. I think that's a no brainer. I let's get it done. I mean, like you said, living in a world where X-Men '97 is dominating the cultural zeitgeist. It's at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's one of the best series to come out in the past decade. It's such a wonderful experience. Like, why not do that? Why are we not getting Power Rangers animated series? It
Yeah.
makes no sense to me as a fan.
Yeah. There's a lot of, I mean, we live in the age of nostalgia and fan service, and a lot of those things get talked down about a lot. But there's a way to do, like, nostalgia is used as a dirty word sometimes, but it just means it's something that we loved from back then. And there's amazing ways like X-Men '97 to do something that isn't fan servicey. It's true stories that are like well written and produced well and speak to people of all like X-Men '97 is creating an entire new generation of X-Men fans we just don't know about yet. There's ways to do it well. So I appreciate that you're lumping us in with those people, but why not continue something like people love Power Rangers and it feels like right now, especially it's a little bit underserviced. Boom's doing good work of keeping the books going and stuff like that. But yeah, where is all the other cool stuff? There's so many opportunities that could be taken advantage of.
Yeah, I mean, Boom showed the world that Power Rangers could be done catered to a more adult audience and work extremely well. And we could tell these bigger stories and we could tell these more adult stories. And I feel like that came out, and the people that were in charge of Power Rangers were just like, yeah, comics are comics, show is show. But I think that now that everything's slowed down, we need to start reassessing the Power Rangers property and we need to get it out there because, like you said, nothing gave me more joy after watching X-Men '97 than there being new Cyclops fans. Because as someone who reads the comics, I'm like, Cyclops is always badass. Like, Cyclops, that's not a new thing. It's just that you guys are so used to seeing the movie Cyclops, which is just a punching bag for Wolverine. But then '97 comes out and it's like, oh man, maybe I should read. How can I learn more about this Cyclops? Like, what comics should I read? So the series is promoting comic books, and
Yeah.
it's just that's what, as a comic book fan, that's what I love. I love when good art makes people go out and research comic books because I want to keep that medium alive as much as possible.
Yeah.
So Matt, before I let you go, I have to ask you one thing. As I saw in your IMDb that you worked on Titans, and as a fan of Nightwing, I just have to ask you how that experience was, because Dick Grayson is my favorite comic book character of all time.
Working on Titans was great. It was the best show I'd ever worked on. It's a huge show, but it felt like literally living in the DC universe. And it's one of those. It's easy to work on TV shows where you're doing like 80 hours a week, and like Titans had a ton of night shoots and a ton of stuff on location, and get jaded by that. But like walking into the Batcave to go to work every day is awesome. Or you're shooting in a police station, and like every TV show's got police stations. You shot on a bazillion police station sets over the course of your career. But over there in the corner, there's the bat signal, and that's pretty damn cool. It felt cool and good, and there's definitely people on that show that were protecting those characters and shepherding them and making sure we were honoring them. So it was fun, and I mean, I was definitely one of the nerdiest dudes on that show. So I had a hell of a lot of fun too, and would definitely make sure my voice was heard if there was something that we were doing that was super cool. I mean, one of the best nights ever on that show is early in season three. Is the season three premiere we were shooting December of 2020 with director Carol Banker, and it was when Joker is killing Jason Todd, Robin, with a crowbar. And it was like 4 in the morning in Hamilton, Ontario, freezing cold, but like perfect snow. And it's one of those things where it's 4 in the morning on what is technically a Saturday now, and everyone's exhausted, but the whole crew quiets down and comes in to watch because this is an iconic, special moment that you're filming in live action for the first time. And you don't get special moments like that on other shows that aren't based on these incredible stories and characters that have been around for decades.
Yeah, I mean, you guys were very fortunate. You were able to depict a lot of stuff in live action for the first time. I mean, that's the first. As I don't want this to sound insensitive, but that was the first crowbarring Jason Todd has gotten in live action. And like, if you're a fan of Batman, you know that moment. It's one of the most iconic moments in that character's history. But that's really cool. And as a fan, like I just love hearing stories like that. So
yeah,
awesome.
When we were doing same episode, same location, and I think it was probably the day before, is Curran Walters, who played Jason Todd, who then ended up as Red Hood. We were doing a scene around a table with all the mafia heads from Gotham City. And that's what Red Hood sort of reveals himself for the first time and throws a severed head on the table. And as we're like blocking it and setting up and figuring things out, Curran, in his full Red Hood gear, pulls out Under the Red Hood, the graphic novel, and like opens it up and slams it down on the table. He's like, no, it's got to look like this. And it's like, awesome, awesome. Like there's people like that, like
See, that's
who
cool
love,
because
yeah, it's super cool, right?
he was a standout for me. I loved him as Jason. He was the perfect little. He played Jason like the perfect little. I'm gonna curse shit weasel. He is like the perfect little shithead. Everyone's little brother that's always just being a jerk. But he was fantastic, and in his emotion, he's just a really good actor. That kid.
Yeah.
Kid, I feel like I'm not that much older than him, but either way, like really great stuff. And I'm fantastic to hear that you guys all had a great time on that set.
Yeah, Ryan Potter, who played Beast Boy, wrote the final episode that we ever shot. He covered it with Jeff Johns. With just
Wow.
such love and reverence for the character, and then having Jeff involved and having Jeff on set was fantastic too as a comic book fan. So definitely people who loved it. It was an experience like nothing else.
That's great to hear. Matt, thank you so much. This was a pleasure. I love talking to you, dude. I need to have you back on when we officially announce the return to, so I can ask you a bunch of questions that you can't answer.
This has been a lot of fun. I love you and people like you out there, like supporting books and online and spreading the word. That's what is keeping this medium alive. You hear all these terrible stories about how comic books are dying, but they're not dying. The fans are out there, and we're hardcore, and we believe in them. And people like you using a platform to spread the word and spread the love gets other people excited. So thank you, because we really appreciate it.
Thank you. And guys, make sure you go and pick up Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, The Return, issue number 4. If you haven't already, while you're watching this video, stop it, pause it, go out and pick it up right now, because it really is the ultimate story for Power Rangers fans. And you all have to read it. Homework assignment.